allowing what we could call non-dual awareness, which to even say to allow such a thing is a contradiction. But I think there's a way of being together in which we can allow this thing to happen. If that, on some level that seems clear, and another it seems somewhat absurd. But I think there is a way of being together in which we can allow that. So I think one of the ways in which we can do that is asking a question, such as the one I'm going to ask, and just to see what happens out of it. So, Robert, what is this?
Ultimate reality would be the closest description.
And what is that?
This present moment, what's immediately here and now.
And what is now?
I sometimes think about an animal, a dog or a cat, and for them, the only thing that has any relevance is what can be within their eyesight, or can be smelled, or tasted, or contacted, or heard. You don't see cats and dogs even looking up at the moon.
No.
Anything outside of the range of their senses is totally immaterial to them. They have presumably no conception, no idea of anything beyond their immediate environment. And then as well, what's immediately in that environment in terms of the moment. We can assume that a dog or a cat probably does not spend time dwelling on the past or concerning itself about the future. I remember a story that Gordon Farrell told me before he died of cancer. He liked to ride his horse, and his boxer dog used to run along with him. And one day the dog had a heart attack as a consequence. And he picked the dog up in his arms and held him and looked into the dog's eyes, and he said there was no fear in the dog's eyes. For the dog, something was going on. There was some feeling and some change of some sort. But the point seemed to be that there was no concern, as far as the dog was concerned, as to what the nature of the change was or what would be the outcome of the change. So I think this is the kind of thing that the Roshis are talking about, is being so present with the time and the place that that attention doesn't tend to wander into realms of the speculative.
Yeah. And well, I don't really have a question. I see. Yeah, I see. It seems this way of questioning in which I guess for me the question and the response have some type of a language can be created in which we can presence this more directly. As you just that example you just gave, I mean, that seems to strike something very present. And also, just thinking about what is now, what is it? You also said before that there's nothing outside of our sensory experience of this, just like a cat or dog. What does that mean? I mean, there's nothing outside of what we experience subjectively. Is that, I guess I'm trying to drive at that subjective perception, that awareness, that we can call it what it is. But is there a world outside of that?
Well, you know, the teachers of Advaita go even farther than what I was describing, and they would say that even what we sense, even what's within our realm of perception, is illusion, is a dream. And this is difficult for us to wrap our imagination or minds around. But essentially, you know, it really goes back again to something I repeat frequently, and that is Ramana's point that in our deepest sleep, there is some kind of awareness there, because if someone was to pinch you or yell fire, you'd wake up. But in that deep sleep, in that awareness that's present there, there's nothing but what would be called in the scriptures pure awareness. There's no sense of being aware. There's nobody there who identifies with anything, with awareness or the body or the world or the universe. So, you know, Ramana is saying that this condition is really our underlying true nature, and that the waking condition, like right now when we're alert, and the dream condition when we're in bed at night and our mind's operating on a different level, those are superimposed on this true nature.
So now this true nature is here,
Of course,
present.
of course.
So what is it that's not true nature?
Well, what I was getting at with that is that sometimes people would raise a question for Ramana, and he would say, did that question occur to you in your deepest sleep? Of course not. So it's not important.
That's right.
So the point is, if you look at it from that standpoint, nothing is important. From that standpoint, nothing matters. Therefore, if you really are, you might say, living in that awareness, which I would tend to call absolute awareness, questions don't arise, because you know the answer to every question. The answer to every question is either it's all that, meaning the absolute, or even more significantly, nothing really matters.
Yeah. There's just some effect of hearing that almost dispels any question.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even when we're just talking, and it seems like as soon as that's seen, there's so little to say.
Oh yeah.
Any question you have drops.
It reminds me of Ram Dass and Be Here Now. He's talking about, he's traveling through India with this friend, sort of a mentor, who's also seeking enlightenment. And but this mentor, this friend of his, has been more engaged in this matter than he had been. He'd just basically come from his practice in psychology, being a professor and all that before he got to India. So anyway, as they're on their travels, he would be talking all the time, and this guide would say, you needn't talk about the past. So he'd continue talking, and before long the guide would say, you needn't talk about the future. And then after a while, still talking, the guide would say, you needn't talk about the present. So, as Ram Dass says, there's very little to talk about under those circumstances.
Yeah.
So he was silent for a change.
Right. I think that on just filming a talk like this, that silence can deepen in seeing the absurdity of talking and of this type of cognition. Any answering or explaining the questions or posing them, it seems to all fall away.
Well, I think the important part is that basically a lot of these teachers talk about what they call a silent mind, and this is basically what they mean. This is what they're talking about. It's not to suggest that there's never, under any circumstances, any mentation. For example, if you're going to fix a grilled cheese sandwich, you have to give that a little bit of thought. But the point is that it's possible to come to a place where there's equilibrium, psychically, in terms of the psyche equilibrium, and that basically is the quiet mind. The silent mind is basically a mind that is aware, alert, but without reaction, you might say.
This way could be, say, the unconditioned mind, the unconditioned.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, and this is a question I'd like to explore, can we penetrate that unconditioned?
I don't know if we can speak about an unconditioned mind because we are all deeply conditioned. And in fact, even though much of self-realization is a matter of dissolving much of that conditioning, nevertheless, for 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, however it's been, however long it's been, we've been so conditioned to some things that they've become habitual. And so, there's certain things, in my observation, there are certain things that do not go away because they are just so deeply ingrained, but they need not be a problem. That's the point, you see. When you come to a place where not anything is a problem, then the conditioning isn't a problem either. But my point is, I don't think we come to a place where we're ever 100% free of any kind of conditioning.
And I guess what I was posing the question is the now always unconditioned?
Well, that's kind of an abstract question because from the standpoint of the now we're talking about, it has no qualities, it has no characteristics.
So it seems in that way, it has no conditions to it.
Yeah, basically. In other words, when we speak about the now and we speak about the absolute, we're not really speaking about two different things. And of course the absolute, by its nature, is said to be unconditioned. And now.
And now.
The deepest conditioning we have is the one that we basically are, you might say, born into, and that is virtually everyone around us, even now, but I mean, let's say when we're a baby, an infant, virtually everyone around us, we can guess, is probably seeing things from a standpoint of duality. I mean, how many of us are raised by parents who are self-realized? And if they were, would they have children? That's another question. But so we grow up from the very beginning with the first selective thought, the first separative thought. I, me, this person here, this organism. And of course, as soon as the I thought appears, then all else is not I. mother is not I, father is not I. I mean, that's why they're mother and father, and that's why I am I. So, you know, from the very first, we've got the first I thought, and therefore the first dualistic thought, and for the rest of our life, we live from the you might say, conditioning of that initial thought, that I thought. So, actually, non-dual realization or self-realization is really a matter of transcending that kind of conditioning. But even then, that doesn't mean that we don't even reflexively think in terms of the I. I mean, that there are practical reasons to refer to oneself. I mean, we still pay our bills and answer to our name. But that's what I mean. In other words, for most people, that conditioning, the dualistic perspective, for many people never ends from the time they're born until they die. And the purpose of the non-dual teachings is basically to say that it's possible to transcend that dualistic conditioning.
Right. Right. Yes. And I posed that question at the beginning, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the very question that, and especially, at least maybe not in Zen practice, but in some of the non-dual practices I've done with teachers now,
Mm-hmm.
in questioning each other, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
All of our explanations
Mm-hmm.
and ideas,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we attach to that,
Mm-hmm.
seems to not hold. And that can be observed somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, actually, that is the question that actually motivates people to look, I would say, at these spiritual matters. In other words, we come to a place in our life where this world seems so confused and confusing and contradictory that we ask ourselves, what the hell is this all about? What is this all about?
What is this?
Yeah, what is this?
What is this? Yeah.
And who is this?
And who is this?
And those kind of questions. The thing is, we're so used to thinking in terms of this or that, or this thing or that thing, that when we begin to look for what is this, we're looking for some other thing. And so this, of course, is the rub when it comes to...
That's right, because what is this? It can sound like it implies a thing,
Mm-hmm.
that this should be.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, for me, the question kind of cuts into my things that I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's this, or I think it's that.
Mm-hmm.
Dual, I think it's one or two. I mean, I think it's two things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought process works in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that question can come so deeply. What is this?
Yeah.
That suddenly there is no two things. There's just pure awareness. I mean, just the state of not knowing both things.
Well, I think that one of the things that's really critical, and I don't think people generally tend to think much about it, but there's one thing in our individual existence that is inevitable for every one of us, and that is the end of this existence, the end of this form of life. And I think that has a lot to do with, again, the motivation to really look, hopefully deeply, into what this existence is all about. Because, you know, particularly as we grow older and come closer to the expected life, you know, life expectancy at the end of it, we really say, you know, what has this been about? What has been the purpose, if any, of this whole drama, this whole existence? So actually, the prospect of our non-existence is a thing that I think that really has the capacity to generate interest in what is existence.
Yes.
As a friend of mine said, Paul Krasner, whom I used to work for, he said that the central fact of my life is my death. And that's certainly true, the central fact of any of our lives.
So that spurs the question, we have to find out what life is, what this is, this existence is then.
Well, you don't have to find out.
You don't have to.
In fact, many people never do find out, I think, but these teachers are telling us it's possible to get a grip on that, to get a handle on that. And that once that is clear for us, then a lot of the kind of anxieties and fears that we have, for example, fear of death, those kinds of things dissipate.
Interesting. Why, how does how I've linked death to this perception of self-realization is as soon as you realize yourself as no thing,
Yes.
it is death.
That's right.
And so death is no longer a separate idea, it's not somewhere tomorrow.
That's right.
It's not somewhere 10 years. It's you have experienced the living death.
That's right. And the sages say that consistently. In fact, one of the things that comes to my mind frequently is Ramana Maharshi was dying of cancer. One of his disciples said, Master, please don't leave us. And he said, leave you? Where could I go? So that was his teaching. That was his teaching. Where could I go?
Yes. Where could I go?
So if that's your point of view, then what fear could you have of death?
In some way, just listening in the room right now, and I hear this ticking, this talk. And if I'm attentive, I notice that every one is brand new. It's never happened before.
That's right.
It's totally alive in a way that is unimaginable.
Right.
And it's not the tick that I just mentioned before. It's So I don't think we realize the uniqueness of the moment we're in.
Well, yes.
That it's never occurred before. Robert.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It is never, and it will never occur again. It's just a brief, it's just like a shuddering, as you see a bird jet across the sky. I mean, it's just that.
Yeah.
And every moment is just that.
Yeah.
And it's just so delicate and raw,
Yeah.
this life.
Well, you know, in the Christian tradition, they have this idea of the Creator, capital C, and His creation, the world and us, as if these were somehow, somehow remote from each other. But, the point is that what's going on right now, just as you said, is totally unprecedented.
Totally unprecedented.
All of this is unfolding moment by moment without following any kind of a plan or any kind of a presupposition as to how it should unfold or what the possibilities are, the potentialities. In fact, the physicists tell us that it's possible for there to be it would be called a phase change, but it has to do with a sudden reversal of certain cosmic forces. But the point is that instantaneously life, particularly in our world, would be eliminated, and that's without any kind of warning. I mean, we wouldn't even know it was occurring till it was a fact. So, yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that there isn't some kind of a plan that's unfolding here according to some cosmic agency that has an idea of what should be.
There's no plan.
Yeah.
And, I mean, all we can say is it's happening.
That's right.
As it's happening.
Without any idea of what should be.
Yes.
I mean, we don't like a lot of what's going on, particularly in the world. We don't like a lot of what's going on. But there's no law in the universe that says A, that we have to like it, and B, that it should be any different than it is. It's exactly what it is, and like it or not, that's what it is.
Yes.
You know, and when you really come to that, a lot of this idealistic stuff comes to an end.
Mm-hmm. Wanting or expecting the world to be a certain way.
That's right. No.
And I think really seeing the miraculousness that this is creation, that we are, that is happening this moment.
Creation isn't something in the past.
No.
Creation's going on, right? As you said,
Yes.
with the tick of that clock, for Christ's sake.
Oh gosh, from the Kabbalah, I once read, we have this Christian idea, or at least in the Bible, that it said, heaven is coming, like it's coming in the future. And in the Kabbalah, it is that heaven is constantly coming. It's constant. It is the very tick of the clock.
Yeah,
it is the very end.
I would say so is hell.
So is hell, yes. Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah.
In fact, there is a evangelical minister in the Midwest who concluded that the hell that he's been preaching all these years is actually here on earth now. And it really affected his ability to continue to preach what he'd been preaching.
Right. So it seems an innate tendency of the mind to point somewhere else. Heaven's out there.
Oh, yes.
Hell's out there.
But that can only come from the idea that there's a center here, and these things are basically in some relationship to this center here. So when the idea of there being a center here dissolves, then those kinds of notions go with it.
That's right.
There's a saying in some of the scriptures about the absolute, and the saying is, center everywhere, circumference nowhere.
Yes. In terms of our starting question, what is this? That reply, center everywhere, circumference nowhere. In that moment of seeing that, everything becomes aliveness in some way. It just becomes purely alive, like this couch I'm sitting on, the way the lamp looks, and the chair behind you. Everything takes on this quality of livingness.
Oh yes.
Of thatness. I think in Buddhism it's called suchness. So, you can see the explosiveness of it.
Yeah. Well, as you know, many people who have things like psychedelic experiences often basically visualize that very thing, the living quality of all that they see. But you see, that's the point that I'm making, is that the idea that we've had historically is that there's some, as I said, agency up in the sky, or agent up in the sky, basically, who's directing what goes on in the objects of the world, including what people do and so on and so forth. But basically, the point of these non-dual teachings is that this that's referred to as the divine or the holy or the sacred or whatever, is, as is described in all the scriptures, in all the literature, omnipresent, therefore surrounding all these forms, but by the nature of being formless, infinite, penetrating all these forms. And so...
And also being all these
that's
forms.
That's it, exactly, yeah. So the agency basically is all that is, and therefore all that's being done is that doing what it does, and it could care less basically what the outcome is of what's being done. There's no idea about how things should go. And as you said, the thing that we're talking about, the sacred or divine or holy or whatever is immanent, as they say in all the scriptures, as well as transcendent, immanent, and therefore that means it's living.
It's living.
Living.
That's it, Robert. Because all of the ideas make it something in the past or something abstract. This is the very living of this moment that this is.
You know, when the astronauts went to the moon, I forget which one it was, Glenn or one of them, looked back at the Earth and said, that's a living organism.
Wow, yes.
And if you look at some of the films and things that are taken of the universe and you see what's going on out there, you recognize this is something that's alive out there. This isn't dead, static matter. This stuff is living. The whole goddamn universe is living.
It is the living, you could say, body of the Creator. Krishnamurti said that the whole cosmos is in meditation. And this is the very body of meditation. Yeah. The stuff of this.
And meditation for him was emptiness, and basically we're saying that all of this is empty of any qualities or any characteristics. Yes. It's what in Buddhism they call the void, or emptiness, or even suchness, whatever. So it's a real miracle when you think about it. Talk about miracles. I mean, it dwarfs any miracle you've ever heard of.
It dwarfs any miracle. I mean, Jesus walking on water and
that's
the Buddha levitating seemed to just pass away.
That's petty stuff.
So then the miracle is somehow this realization. And I don't know what to call it besides that word.
That's a good word for it.
It's some type of like attunement of the mind into total presence. Beyond form and beyond...
Yeah, right, exactly.
Beyond ideas and conceptions.
Yeah, and the point is that absolute awareness that you're talking about doesn't negate the forms or the concepts to the extent that they, you might say, serve practical purposes. In other words, we can still say this is my car and this is my grilled cheese sandwich. And we can still, have certain conceptions about certain things that are practical and useful. So none of that has to be done away with. We're not talking about excluding anything. We're talking about including everything. And so, prior to this realization that you're talking about, we prior to that, we're living on kind of a continuum, a spectrum, which is relative. In other words, there's this thing over here and that thing over there in terms of our perception, a dualistic perception, what's relative. And with this realization, then there's something that intersects that. In other words, it comes together with that, but it's of a different nature, different quality. And essentially, that is the perspective from which we live once it's present. But it doesn't mean that the relative goes away. I mean, a chair is still a chair, and a houseboat is still a houseboat. But with this awareness, we're actually seeing through those forms and seeing the formless in whatever we see. So I think it's important to recognize that, because many people have the idea that with absolute awareness somehow you become some kind of a zombie with no relationship to anything any longer that's in the relative world.
Yeah.
The relative world's still a relative world. It's just now there's a whole different perception of what that world is that's being seen and who's seeing it.
And who's seeing it, yeah. So maybe that should be our final question, Robert. Who is seeing it?
Yeah.
I mean, no one's seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the standpoint of what we're talking about, nothing's happening, nothing's going on.
And interesting, nothing is seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing is seen.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Papaji titled one of his books, Nothing Ever Happened. And that's what he means. That from the standpoint of what we're talking about, from this absolute formless condition, there's not even movement. And that's why they speak of it often as unchanging. No change in the absolute itself. The manifestations, the forms come and go, they all change. But the ground of being out of which they arise and to which they return is ever present, eternal and infinite and unchanging. So from the standpoint of the absolute, nothing really is happening.
Mm-hmm.
From the standpoint of the forms, what's happening is existence and non-existence, coming and going, being and not being.
Mm-hmm.
So we think of ourselves as a form, and then we think of ourselves as, well, I'm here today, tomorrow I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
But if we see ourselves as the absolute, we weren't born and we don't die.
Right.
That's why another name for the absolute is the unborn.
Right.
It doesn't come from anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere. So when you really get a hold of that perspective, as we said before, the questions are all pretty self-revealing.
Yes. The questions are self-revealing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Somehow the questions reveal that formless,
Mm-hmm.
that space that is.
Mm-hmm. And essentially that's all there is to be said.
Yes.
It's all nothing. In fact, in the Bible there's a place where one of the people in the Old Testament says, he's talking about basically the world and so on, and basically he says, nothing, nothing, nothing. Or emptiness, 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 you could say in Buddhism, the same thing. Gate, 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 gone forever. Paris and gate.
Well, thank you, Rob. Good talk.